Hello, I'm Mark Tucker.
Hey there, I'm Alan Furstenberg. We are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Hey, Alan.
Hey, Mark. So I think we need to explain what everyone's about to see and hear, because it's a little different than usual.
Yeah, it is. I was just working on something over the weekend, kind of playing around with Jovo version 4 a little bit, but then also trying to think through some of the ideas that we have talked about over the last weeks about content management systems and trying to figure out how that might work. So it's not really, it's not really a discussion on Jovo, and it's not really a full discussion on content management systems. It's kind of a little playground, show and tell discussion. What do you think?
And I think the other important bit is that this was, you texted me over the weekend and said, hey, I got something to show you and chat about. So this comes from a huge conversation we actually had this weekend, just because we were chatting and, knowing us, we hit record just in case. And I think it comes out really well, but it's very different than our usual Two Voice Devs.
It's formatted differently. There's a lot of screen code share. So if you're listening to audio only, I think you can still glean things from the conversation, but you might want to check out the video.
Yeah, and if you're watching video, you're going to notice we're not doing our usual side-by-side presentation. A lot of screen shares, as you said. So things are different, but it's okay, because I think it's really cool. I mean, I think what we were talking about was really fun and really interesting. And again, this is edited down from, a couple of hours of a conversation. So there may be some odd jumps in a couple of places. There may be some strange cuts. Things may suddenly end and you're wondering what was supposed to happen next. Some of that we may get to again in the future, but maybe not. I don't know. We'll see what it looks like. So anyway, here it is, and we hope you enjoy.
Yep, enjoy. All right. So the premise that I wanted to go with was that Jovo already handles multiple platforms, and they follow a concept. Jovo follows this writer lifecycle, which is for each turn of a conversation, you get the request in. There's some interpretation that has to happen. There's a section where there's dialogue and logic, and then you build your response. So everything has a request. In the world of Alexa and Google, then a lot of the ASR and NLU already has happened. So that interpretation has already happened. If you're doing a chat bot or something else like that, then you might plug in your own ASR and NLU engines into this section. Then there's the part where there's the dialogue and logic, and then the response. So the problem I was trying to solve or play around with was the response side of things with the content management system. But what could we do to allow designers to create the different templates that are the output and have control, like conditional control over when they get shown and when they don't. The idea being is that this dialogue and logic section is the realm of the developer, and our job would be to set flags, route calls, and set up data so that when the response happens, that the designer or content creator has the information that they need to do their job. And that this response could be configurable. And if it might also, I guess, if I was thinking, if I could configure the list of responses in a JSON object, then that meant it could be data, which could have a UI, which could be separate.
Now, in the writer model for the response part, does that include the Jovo templates, which are classes?
Yes,
if I remember correctly?
Well, in the end, the response, I'll run through an example and then it will be clearer to you. but the realm of the developer is like what we've talked about before, the context. And there's lots of things that are in the context. The context could be what intent was being called. It could be one or more flags are set. Something has a certain value. Like you've made an API call for a list of people, and you're going to list through the list of people, and that's a data object that includes the array of people objects that could have 0, 1, or more responses to it. So that's kind of what I was wanting to focus on, that side of things. So let's take a look at the Jovo Debugger. So the Jovo Debugger is a tool just like any other client, but it has its own JSON format that it requires as input, and as the response comes back out, it's got a specific response that's custom to it. So, it's acting right now as a proxy to Alexa, because like if I were to do like this launch intent or this launch request, it says, oh, here's the launch. I'm getting back my response of welcome. Let's say that I want to go ahead and end that. Then I get a response, see you later. Launch it again, I get a welcome back this time as opposed to a welcome. I can end it. In this case, it's the same thing. But let's say I launch, I do help, I get a template for help, I get a template for hello. I don't have any templates right now specified for yes and no. I end, I get a come back soon, which is different, right? Yep, see you later, come back soon. All right. So let's take a look at some of these. So like this launch, here's the request as the Jovo Debugger sends it. So it says, oh, my platform is Jovo Debugger, and this is a unique ID for the request. And here's my time zone, and I've got some context about the device, and here's some information about the session, including a unique ID, and whether this is a new session or not. I've got some information about a user and some data about them. So that is the request that's coming raw from Jovo Debugger, but would be the same JSON that we're used to format for Alexa or Google.
So to be clear there, it's, the request is in a Jovo standard format, but it, whatever the data, if it was coming from an Alexa, it would be Alexa's data in Jovo's format.
No.
It was coming from, so this is in a platform.
This is the raw platform specific request.
Got it. Okay.
And then on the outside, this would be the raw platform specific response. In this case, it's formatted to Jovo Debugger, and it's got an output saying, here's a message that I'm going to say, welcome, and I'm going to keep listening, keep the microphone open in this case. Okay. So what I guess the magic, and these are what Jovo calls middlewares. That's part of the writer model. So like the writer model is broken up then into different sections. So what happens and what makes Jovo platform independent in a lot of ways is that the fact that it takes this request and it creates this input object. So it's saying, oh, I asked for a launch, and the type of my input is a launch. And so then it does things like, okay, oh, I'm getting some information about the device. Here is some information about the session. So like this is a new session. Information about the user. Oh, this is a new user. This is the first time that before this, the database record didn't exist for this user, and now the database record does exist. And then it figures out a route. It looks at all the different handlers that are available and says, these are the possible handlers. And there is still this concept of states, but it has to do with components. So when you go into a component, then it's a state. And so that component in essence gets put onto the top of the stack. And so what's in the matches will be based on where you are in the context. So I'm not taking away anything from Jovo's, how they function with registering handlers and using components. That's all the same, but what ends up happening is it finds which one matches the best And there's some criteria that it's used to do that. And so it's saying, oh, I'm going to call the launch handler inside my global CMS global component. Then what happens on the output side is you build things onto the output. And so that's the platform agnostic output, similar to input being the platform agnostic input. And then there's code that says, oh, if this response is Jovo Debugger, then take this message, then format it this way. And so, all right, same type of thing. So launch and end are special input types, whereas like help intent would be more like the typical intents that we've got. So its input's a little bit different. That its type is intent, and then it has a name for an intent. So it's help intent. Also,
and if that intent had parameters, that there would be additional...
Yes, there'd be entities, and yeah, there would be things that it would extract out from that. So this example doesn't have anything that has slots yet, but so that's that. Also, I wanted to show you, like on the end, the output is actually an array of items.
Interesting. Okay.
And it automatically does the randomization based on that list. There could be multiple items in the output array. And if that's the case, then there'd be multiple output responses or like items in this log here. Like it's showing like this is the first output, index 0. If there's multiple outputs, then in like chatbots, that would be multiple bubbles here. In the case of Alexa, it squishes it into just one. But then if like a message and listen, there's a handful of things that you can have in the output and these are Jovo defined. So once again, even though I'm trying to do some stuff like with templating and content management stuff, I'm still using the functionality already built into Jovo to handle outputs. So I don't know. Okay. Does that make sense so far with what I'm walking through?
Yeah.
Okay. So the other thing, before I jump into code, the other thing I wanted to show you is this idea that we talked about, like the environment or like the context, like in multivocal, you throw everything into the environment, right? You're putting data in the environment, you're putting flags in the environment, and then templates can use information out of the environment to pick which template, or also to fill in values in the template, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So I did do a little bit of looking at multivocal. So this is, I'm trying to say, like, stay within the bounds that Jovo has set up, but do some of the same concepts and kind of, flesh that out. So data can be grouped into short-term data storage, or longer term data storage. So these are, in the end, there's this Jovo object that you get. But in a lot of cases, then it's really the environment. There's some other things, but for example, this, I could do my Jovo object, I could say this Jovo object dot request, $request, and I could get this raw request.
Yep. So all of this stuff is available. Everything that's here is available in the Jovo object.
Exactly.
At some point. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. All right. The other thing to take into consideration is that there's places to put data. So there's this $data, and that's going to be I'm just throwing some data just for this request. And so when that round trip ends, then the data is no longer on that object, and it's not persisted anywhere.
So this is where you'd store, where you potentially store results from an API call or computed value that makes sense in this,
So any flags that you want to set, and there's a case where I'm using this exactly for, like, I'm setting an outtent, and then I'm basing an intent on an outtent, and a template response based on an outtent. So that's exactly where I'm putting it. If you're working inside of components work a little bit different, but yeah, there's a place to put it. The session level, and then this is as long as the Lambda is running, then there's this app data section as well. So I could cache some things that are going, if it's going to be the same for every user regardless, then I could cache it at the app data level.
That makes sense. Like a message of the day, or something that's long running.
Yeah. So then adding to that, there's this user data, which is stored in a database. This session data is, like we say, is stored as part of the request response, but there's a flag that actually says, even though you're treating it like session data, it's still stored in the database. And so that's kind of like a configuration setting behind the scenes. So if you're in a situation where you've got something that doesn't have that, like, I don't know, if like Facebook Messenger may not have that ability.
Or even if, you've got a lot of session data and you know that it's going to start getting larger than what you should be sending back, then that makes sense.
Just flip a flag. You're still treating it like this is session information for me. And then the other thing is like there's this history. So this would be a case if I wanted to say repeat, then I could grab the thing that was just most recent in history and mimic that back. So those are all those in essence are kind of the places where you can put data that would be part of this environment object, right? So in essence, the premise is the Jovo object itself with all of its ability to access data and its ability to access anything in this life cycle off of that is the environment.
Yes.
Okay.
The same concept, structured a little bit differently.
Yeah.
I think, to kind of compare it to multivocal, the biggest thing that I see that's different is that in environment, multivocal also includes a configuration object, and maybe that is included in the app object. So all of the configuration, ranging from what each possible response is to even things like, if I want to set as a parameter somewhere that I should be returning 5 items at a time, I could just create a configuration field and put that into the configuration field and later reference it because it's in the environment.
Gotcha.
Or, if I've got 3 different voices that I want to switch between, those voice names and the configuration on each platform is just in a configuration object, and I can access that somewhere else. To know that, the favorite color for the voice that is Mark is blue, and the favorite color for the voice that is Sarah is pink.
Got it.
So all of that is just, everything is configuration, and that configuration object is also available.
Okay. So that's good, because this templates object, I created this templates JSON file. So this would be, in essence, either the framework that is this thing, this content management system concept, could have a template file, or it could be part of the context. So this could, or the environment with the config stuff. So this is kind of, right now how I handled that concept. So inside of this main app, then I'm pulling in things that are called hooks, which are different things that happen at different points in the life cycle. Maybe I need to show you the life cycle here really quick. So there's these things called hooks or plugins, and they plug into the life cycle at some point. So this is the life cycle, and these are kind of like the outputs of different steps of the life cycle, but they go through different steps in the life cycle. So here are the middlwares, and they've got 2 different types. We'll focus on the writer middlewares here. So when the request first comes in, there's a request.start. So you're just entering this thing called request. This is the point where the raw JSON comes in and is assigned to the request object, and then you end. So for each of these that are part of this like first writer step, which is the request, you can do the middleware as is, or you can do a before.request.start or an after.request.start. So you've got some, you've got some fine grain where you can go in and plug different things in. So then there's this interpretation stage where it starts this whole group of the second writer step, where it starts. This is where it does ASR, where it does NLU, and then ends. Then this next section, which is the dialogue and logic section, where it figures out the router. So this is going to be like which components are going to get routed to. This actually calls the handlers.
And at any point in here, you can do things like modify the data that's available in that object or change it to, this is where you would apply additional. Yeah. Okay. Total sense.
All right. And then the same thing with the response. So there's an output, and then there's the TTS. And so that's all the different middlewares that are available. So as part of this app, you can define the list of components. And right now I've only got one component, and it's at the global level. There's always going to be one component that's at the global level. And then you can define plugins. And here I've said, at the dialogue start step, before the dialogue start step, then I'm going to check to see if it's a new user, and then any code that has to do with like the first time that this user's information is created. So I could like put default values into the database for this user, or new sessions. I could set flags or variables or different things that I needed to here. I could even conceptually make an API call to fetch data, put that into the context, right? Request and go ahead.
So I guess, so what we're looking at here, is it a Jovo app or is it a Jovo plugin such that there is a separate app that will be injecting that there's the CMS part where you are building and configuring stuff, and this is the component that will inject it into each Jovo request?
Well, so this is,
or am I misunderstanding something?
Yeah. All right. So at the very basic, in this case, we're using Express, JS. And so this is doing very much defining like what port. This is going to be the endpoint for the webhook, and it points to this app handler. So there is this app, which is defined here. So an app is like defining everything for your application.
And again, we're talking a Jovo app at this stage, right?
Well, this would be the place where you would say, oh, I'm going to import Alexa, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to register Alexa as a configuration inside my app. So now it's an app that deals with not just Jovo Debugger stuff, but also Alexa stuff. So this is the pluggable place, like you're defining that this application is going to be what type of platforms this application supports, and any type of configuration or registering of code that you need to do.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So let's take a look at some of this. So some of these are just placeholders because I've used them before in the past, but like basically at that point in the life cycle where I've got the dialogue. So the session's already happened. The data has already been loaded from the database to get my user information. Then I can check to say, here's this Jovo object that I get, and I can say $session.is new, and then put any code in. And so anytime the session's new, then this code would execute. Similar with anytime there's a new user, then this code would execute. This is kind of just a generic one. It's the same as these other ones. It's listening at the same lifecycle event, but it's not conditional. So if there's something that I wanted to happen on every request, then I could put this. And the idea, once again, would be to get data, put that into the context, create flags, check multiple flags and set or values and set a flag. So it's all like, what are the information in the simplest form that we could add to the context so that designers could use that to select templates.
Repeat that again, just to make sure I heard that. Because
our job in any of these hooks or any of our handlers as a developer is to put data into the context, evaluate data and existing values or flags, and create flags So our job is to make things as easy as possible for content creators to know, to have the knobs. We're defining the knobs and values that they're going to use to select templates and to put values into templates. All right, so there's nothing really going on here. Here's one that I plugged in. This is called the hello intent. And this is saying, oh, if my input.intent is hello world, I'm going to say, set on my data, the outtent is hello. And that's all it's doing. It's just saying, hey, in this case, so I have the ability on my templates to just look at the intent or the input type itself, or I can set that up to say, I want to look at a specific outtent on the template. And so this would be an example of setting that outtent based on some logic. In this case, it's just the intent name. But I could then determine my output template based on just setting a data value. All right, so let's take a look at our global components. So this is all typical Jovo stuff. All the logic for selecting what the output is going to be is in the CMS output. Typically, I'll show you, like here's the real example from Jovo where we're like, if you're launching, I'm going to go ahead and redirect to this other love hate pizza component. And the love hate pizza component is going to start. This send means I'm going to write something to the output. So here's that message that we saw before. But we're saying send it to some yes, no output class, but I'm going to override the message or any message, or I guess set whatever message is to this value so in essence, I'm passing a value into my output template. And then this is where I'm defining an intent for, yes, intent, no intent, unhandled, goes back to start. But I haven't got that complicated in my example. But and what would typically happen in a Jovo is that here I've got this specific output class that's got a build, and so I'm returning back what's going to be in my output, which is whatever the message was that I sent in, plus this quick reply. So this is a way that you can on chatbots or probably even on Google with what are those called?
Suggestion chips.
Suggestion chips.
Yeah.
I always
it took me a minute to remember the word as well. Yeah.
And then this is the flag. Do you leave the microphone open? Yes or no?
So this is a way to kind of build the boilerplate for a yes/no reply, and send in the specifics about what you're prompting for.
Yeah. So you could reuse this yes/no output multiple times and so this is And this is kind of similar to this is an outtent. So this is anytime I want to send something back with some question and a yes, no response, I'm going to go ahead and use this output. So what I've done is I've replaced that, which would be the typical way you would do things, with this CMS output, which is handling it based on templates and conditional logic.
Got it. Yes.
So in essence, I've kept those away to kind of, for me to remember how things work, but all I'm doing is this is where all of the work is happening as far as the selecting of the templates is in the CMS output. So all that's happening in here is there are some shortcuts. I can specify whatever name I want to on these handlers, but remember the input dot type, there's one called launch. There's an input type called input dot type called end. So I can just use those, but I'm not putting, in this case, I'm not putting any logic on. I'm just saying, I want you to send the output to this other component that's going to handle the output. Because I could, here's an example. I could, in this unhandled, I could say this dot send and put in a string. And if it's a string, then it's just going to set the message object on my output to whatever that string is. In this case, I'm doing send and an output class. So I'm just
saying refer everything to the output class.
Output object. And I could also then pass in a parameter and say, here's some message or whatever the handful of things that you can have in your output.
Right,
template class.
but you wouldn't necessarily in this case, because the whole point of it in this case is that you've already populated everything into the Jovo object,
Yes,
and that the CMS output has total responsibility
it has
for
everything
what
it
to do.
needs. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm totally removing the output from any of the logic. And as long as me as a developer follow the guidelines that I'm only putting data into the environment. I keep saying context, but it's the environment.
Yep.
I see those as the same thing, but I know that context means something differently to Google people, because there is an actual context. So like, here's a case where I've got this generic handler and I'm saying all these intents map to this generic handler.
So let me ask you something here.
Yeah.
Isn't it really that just everything you want to map to the same handler in general in your model here?
Well, you
Not necessarily in
could.
Jovo's model, but in your model with the CMS.
Well, you could potentially, but you could still have different handlers that would be where your builder stuff would go from multivocal. These handlers would be a place to do logic, make API calls, set values in the environment. They would all end with sending it to the CMS output.
I got it. Okay. No. So it almost more seems like to use the multivocal model, which I'm not saying is the best, but in the multivocal way of thinking of it is more like, by default, we're going to send everything to CMS output. And in a couple of places, we want to do additional logic or add additional values into the environment, the content, the Jovo object. So we will set up special cases just for those.
Yeah.
So it's more like what you want is some way to say the default handler is return this and CMS output. And then I'll define a couple of other special cases, which will also do whatever they want to do, and then return this and CMS output.
Yeah. So we've got a little bit of flexibility, because in the end, this intents is just looking at the $input dot intent name.
So I guess actually my question is, is there, I see there's a start, there's the end, there's unhandled. Is there a default? Or
not really.
Fallback or
so unhandled
function of no other thing.
Yeah.
So unhandled.
So you could, yeah. You definitely could do that. There's also, and this will, I don't know, this was exciting to me. This may or may not be exciting to you.
Well, this is exciting to me because what that sort of says to me is I don't need to define a whole bunch of them. I just need to define the ones where I'm actually doing work.
Yes.
And then have an unhandled one, which just handles everything else.
Yes.
And okay. And really what it then boils down to is, in most cases, what I'm really have is I've got all of these before hooks and during hooks. I can put all of my logic in those. And then that class really just has everything is unhandled. Everything should be handled by the templates.
Yeah. So yeah, you can handle it a number of different ways, because there's its own logic for specifying handlers. And so you could use a hook to capture something at a certain point in the life cycle. And then you could say, oh, if it's these certain conditions, I'm going to actually change my input object so that my handler is something else. So my handler doesn't have to be an intent. My handler could be get list of users, or, so it turns into more of a, handlers aren't handling intents, they're handling data.
Yep.
And then you direct to the template. But this is the thing that kind of blew my mind. So here we've seen this. There's a number of, because this is TypeScript and you can use aspects in essence. There's this aspect for handle. Remember, the aspect I used was for intents, intent, and then it was an array of intents. I could do a generic handle and then specify the intents that are part of that.
Yes.
So like that's exactly what this showed. Is this is the same as this? It's just depending on how you wanting to use it. So there's intents, there's types, there's global. But look at this. You can filter based on platform.
Very cool.
And there's
Yes.
an if.
To
So
handle other generic properties
you could
that are
set
in the
up
Jovo
hooks.
object.
You can set up hooks at some point in the life cycle and then use a value of a flag in an if to then route what you need to do.
Awesome.
I know, that just blew my mind.
Very cool. Yes. No,
so-
annotate. I love the notion of annotations, and I
Yes.
love when they just kind of. The thing I love about annotations is just how much code they get rid of.
Yeah, exactly. So like here's a case where you've got and the routing handles this. So it says there's certain rules that if there's an if in it, then that's going to take top priority. As if there's something where there's a platform, then that takes a higher priority. If there's more of these properties that are set, then that takes a higher priority. So that's all the routing logic that Jovo does for you. So you could still rely on Jovo to totally route and pick stuff for you. You've got the full ability of Jovo to use components and to group things however you want, but you could abstract away or move away from the concept that a handler is an intent. A handler could be whatever you want a handler to be.
Yes.
Because of this if. So like here you get the Jovo object, you have access to anything in the environment now.
Yep.
So you can say, yeah, this is
fantastic.
This is what I want to do, right? So that
and I'll be honest, that is not something that multivocal does quite yet.
So
that's very cool.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. So the last
mind you,
part,
I love I mean, in general, I love the notion that handlers are not intent bound, because as we always talk about, what we really want is this thing that does stuff based on the entire environment, the entire context, and the intent is just one tiny piece of that.
Yes. And the same thing is, I also really love the idea of divorcing the output from the handler itself and using an outtent or something like that, because you're like, then you can start defining, like, I want a welcome message, I want a list users message. Okay, so now this is the magic, all the code to handle this CMS output.
Yep.
I think it's going to make more sense if I show you the templates JSON file next. All right, so here is an array. So once again, imagine that this could be something that's in the UI. You could create a template.
I got this already. Yep.
All right.
Totally seeing this.
So a friendly name right now, some sort of a priority order. Right now, things are sorted first by priority ascending and then by name ascending. So that's going to be the way that this list of templates is handled.
And then it filters it based on condition.
So here's a condition. I'm just using that $ intent equals help intent. It's just.
Yep.
And then the output is just whatever Jovo wants in that output object. Once again, if there's multiple items in this output array, it's going to be multiple bubbles. If it's a chatbot, it's going to be smushed together if it's Alexa. But so any of the things that you can put in here, like message or the whether it's listening or not, a reprompt. There's also, like, the message could be a string, or the message could be an object that splits out what is said versus what is displayed on a screen.
Okay, but that's just standard Jovo standard message object.
Yeah. So very simple. A condition on, if it's the help intent, I'm going to say help intent. If it's hello, I'm like, oh, if the data has an outtent that is hello, then I'm going to use the hello template. If the input type is launch, and it is a new user, then I get the welcome template. Welcome back in temp is the same thing, except for if is new user is false, and goodbye if the input type is end. Then here's this case where it's an array. And then when that gets turned into a response, it's going to randomly pick one of those from the array. And then here is no conditions set, a no template.
And it has a larger priority, so it gets picked last.
It gets picked last, but I also, and if there's nothing in here, then I default to true. So just the word true would is a valid condition.
That's interesting, because that's like the opposite of JavaScript.
Yeah, well, it's the library that I found that does that actually breaks this.
That's doing the evaluations, yeah.
And this, into different things, accepted just the value true, and so.
No, that makes total sense. It's interesting.
The only thing that's different is I've got this exclusive flag here, the meaning that I only want this template to be executed if, because this template's going to show up in every response. What I do is I check to see if I get to this point that this template hits it and it's marked as exclusive. If I have already responded with something else, then I don't respond with this. So there might be better ways to do it.
No, I've been wrestling with that notion about in multivocal as well, is that I want to be, in multivocal, it's slightly different than this, since it does a bunch of other filtering and then it gives you a set of responses, and each response has its own condition, or clusters of them have conditions. And one of the things is that before it goes and picks one at random, it evaluates the conditions and comes up with a list. And what I kind of want is a way to say, evaluate all these conditions to come up with a list, and only use these responses if nothing else happens. So exclusive is a good way to put it. And I've been wrestling with the exact, code to handle that.
All right. So the code to do this is not very big.
That's the fun part.
Yeah. I'm totally struggling with TypeScript and JSON files. I tried to do it with an import. Actually, in some of these libraries that I've got aren't behaving in TypeScript. Like this expression language doesn't have type. It doesn't have like a TS file.
That's annoying.
Or types file related with it. This sort was coming out weird. So I know I'm totally doing this wrong with having requires, but I got tired of fighting with it. I wanted to see results. So here's CMS output. Here's the build response. I just knew up this expression language. What this expression language does is it takes in the string expression and it takes in a data object that it can pull values out of. And then, so like here's the case where if there's no condition, I default it to true. So I go through and get I go through each of these things. This is in my filter. So I go through every template and get a list of candidate templates based on those that matched the filter. And then here's my output template array. And I go through each of these candidates sorted first by priority ascending and then by name ascending. And then I check to see if there's an exclusive flag. If there's not one set, I set it to false. And this is where I check to see if it's exclusive. Then I'm going to go ahead and do the output, but I'm going to break so nothing else shows up. Otherwise, I'm going to concat the output to the other output and output it. And that is it.
Yeah.
So, and this is kind of cool because you can build up, like this is an example, this is expression language evaluator. So you just have an expression and data, but you could also use data in the condition of what I don't know yet is, or something that I would want is like if some value is in a list of values, like an array includes or something like that. but I'm not sure if it does it. I don't know. But that is
Very cool.
That's it. That was the result of about 5 hours of programming.
You are a much faster coder than I am.
There's not that much code here. I was mostly trying to figure out how these different things worked.
So, again, I'll have just gone through editing this by the time everyone sees it, and I'm sure I will have had a blast going through it. I hope people liked it as much as we enjoyed having the conversation.
Yeah, it was definitely a good conversation. It was a fun few hours. The time just went by.
It really did. That's one of the great things about kind of beginning to dive into some of this stuff. We've been talking the past, it seems like a little over a month now, about actually doing some of the things we were just talking about. So diving in and seeing how you are thinking through it and how it fits into Jovo and how all of these pieces came together. And some of the parts that got cut out are what I was doing with multivocal and how I thought multivocal was also fitting in.
Yeah.
We'll do those another time because I think this is
definitely worth
enough.
seeing.
Yeah, but it's just great just being able to sit and chat about those sorts of things. And I want to encourage folks, if any of this sounded interesting, talk to Mark. I can guess, Mark, you wouldn't mind a couple of other people volunteering to help out with some of this. Yeah.
This is just an exploration, and additional thoughts are definitely welcome.
Yeah. So find us on Twitter, find us on LinkedIn, come to my office hours. Obviously, we love chatting about this stuff. And, I am sure this is going to come up again another time on Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Take care, everybody.
Take care.